Hello and welcome to the Get Clear Show. I'm Laura Wing. I'm your host. Today I have a most interesting guest with me. His name is Clay Church, and I think you're going to find Clay to be extremely fascinating. In all the years that I have been doing the Get Clear Show, I have never had the opportunity to interview somebody who has had such an interesting background in terms of serving the United States. And so I am proud today to introduce you to Mr. Clay Church. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Laura.
So Clay, we got to talk a little bit earlier today, and you were telling me about all of these amazing adventures that God has given you the opportunity to be a part of. So very quickly, would you tell our audience just a little about yourself, where you've come from, some of the things maybe that you've had the opportunity to do with your life, and then we'll talk a little bit about this great country of ours.
Oh, that'd be awesome. I appreciate it. I live in Fort Worth, Texas now, and it's a great place to live. And what brought me to Fort Worth was the Air Force. And it was back in 1983 that my family and I moved here to Fort Worth. But prior to that, the Air Force and the opportunities to serve my country actually began at Texas Tech, where I was going to school. And one of the things I wanted to do at the time was carry the U.S. flag at football games. And the only organizations that were allowed to do that was the Army and Air Force ROTCs. So I went and talked to both organizations and decided to go with the Air Force. So I've actually been involved with or somehow affiliated with the Department of Defense since 1975, that first year I was at Texas Tech. And I was able to get along with the team that did the flag carrying at the football games. It was a saber flight, and I was able to attend several Texas Tech football games and other events to carry the U.S. flag.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and the reason I think that's interesting is I don't know that I've ever met anybody who said, one of my goals in life was to get to carry the American flag at anything. I've just never met anybody who said that that's what they wanted to be able to do. So what was it about that intrigued you?
Well, I just love this country and love the things that our country's been able to do and the freedoms that we enjoy. And certainly to me, the symbol that encompasses that in a great way is the U.S. flag. And the flag to me demonstrates the love that a lot of people have for this country, and a lot of people continue to do that wear or serve in our U.S. military.
That's pretty fascinating. So how long did you spend in the Air Force?
I was actually with the Air Force almost 24 years. Was on active duty for 9 years, from 1980 to 1989. Got off active duty and was with the Texas Air National Guard for a little while, and then was affiliated with the Air Force Reserve. And finally hung up my military uniform on the 31st of December, a little over 10 years ago, on the 31st of 2003, and have had other opportunities to wear it, but have not. It's been there hanging in the closet, but I still serve with the military. I'm now with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in Fort Worth, and so get to see a lot of the great things that our military services still provide for the freedoms that we enjoy here in the United States.
Wow. You've had the chance to be a part of so many different things, so many really interesting things that other people maybe haven't had the chance to experience. You've traveled a lot, and I know that you've been to various military bases and just done all sorts of things. What are some of the highlights that have happened throughout your life that have been the most intriguing or the most interesting, at least to you?
Well, since being in the military, I've had a couple of really unique opportunities. One was with the 301st Fighter Wing out at what's now the Joint Reserve Base here in Fort Worth. It was following 9/11, and we were doing some missions over in the Kosovo area, enforcing the no-fly zones. I was actually able to go to Aviano Air Base, Italy, for one of those rotations, and was able to see that part of the world and see the great things that our country was doing at the time in those conflicts. The other one that comes to mind has been recently with actually going back to one of the very first things that I was doing when I was on active duty. I was able to go to Bismarck, North Dakota, and help out with the flood fighting that the Army Corps of Engineers was doing with the Federal Emergency Management Agency in the floods of 2011. And so I was able to be there working out of the State Emergency Operations Center in Bismarck, and was actually able to take a few hours off one day and drove to the silo where I used to do subterranean strategic aerospace alert with the 321st Strategic Missile Wing out of Grand Forks, North Dakota. So that missile launch complex is now a museum. So I was actually able to.
So what was that like to go someplace that you actually worked and it's now a museum? Did that make you feel old?
It definitely shows that I've been around for a day or two.
You've been around for a little while. Yeah, that's neat. What are some of the other highlights?
There was one trip I took, and this was prior to going to Texas Tech. I was actually able to save some money, and I was in high school, bought a Honda 450, and a couple of friends and I were going to take a trip across the United States and go see Canada. And lo and behold, as the time got closer and closer, my friends got fewer and fewer, and ended up that the trip did take place, but I had to do it by myself. So I drove a motorcycle from...
All by yourself in high school?
All by myself.
Oh my goodness.
I now know why my mother has a few gray hairs. But the trip went really well. Went from Dallas, Texas to visit an aunt and uncle, and he was an Army officer and was at the Carlisle Barracks in Pennsylvania at the time, going through their war college. And stayed with them for about a week. Saw some of the sites there in Washington, D.C., and then drove my motorcycle up into Canada, drove across Canada Highway 1, and saw some of those areas of Canada, and then stayed with my father, who's living in Calgary at the time.
Wow.
And so...
How long did it take? I'm just curious. How long does it take on a motorcycle to go from Dallas, Texas to Canada?
Well, I was able to break the trip up with going from Dallas to Washington, D.C., which was a couple of days, 3 days actual
Only
travel
3 days?
time.
I would have thought it took longer.
No, it wasn't too terribly bad. There was a couple long days there going through the bluegrass country of Kentucky and seeing some sights in of our country that I still remember even today.
We live in such a beautiful country, don't we?
We actually do. We really do. That trip to Canada was interesting also, and got to spend some time with my father. He passed away in 1983, so have not been able to share some of life's excitements and life's joys with birth of my children and now birth of my grandchildren, but was able to spend about a month with him, and then drove my motorcycle back into the United States on the western coast.
And that was before you needed a passport to get into Canada, right?
That is correct.
It was a while ago.
A while back, so driver's license was all that
was
we needed
good
at
enough,
the time.
yeah.
But I got to see my grandparents in Los Angeles or at Pasadena, California, spent a little time with them, and then drove home. So it was a summer-long trip, but it was broken up with seeing some relatives.
I think that's probably every teenage boy's dream, to be able to get to do that. But in this day and age, parents just don't let their kids do that. Did you have to talk your mother into that, or did you tell her you were doing this? How did that come about?
She knew that was going on, but this was before cell phones, and so there was phone calls every couple of days, make sure that she knew where I was, and certainly staying with relatives along the way. Knew that
that probably helped.
Yes, very much.
It's not
so.
like you just took off with no direction.
Exactly.
Yeah, so.
No,
I'm still very fascinated. We just don't allow our children to have enough adventure in their life, I don't think, anymore, with video games, and we just protect them by keeping them indoors. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's just different, isn't it?
It is different now, and being a parent myself, I can certainly
See
understand
the concern.
that. Yes.
Yeah. So, Clay, before this episode today, we were talking a little bit about The greatest example you said of service was Jesus Christ himself, and how God's hand has sort of been in all of the opportunities that you've had in your life, and that you can look back over that and see. And you talked about your daughter in particular, how you could see God engineered an opportunity for you to come back to Texas where she could be better taken care of. You want to explain that to our audience?
I had a daughter that was born in December of 1982. She was born with some physical anomalies, missing a fibula bone in her right leg, and she had two fingers on her right hand. And so we knew that the medical care she needed was going to be long term. And God opened doors for us, and the Air Force actually moved me under a humanitarian assignment from Grand Forks to, at the time, what was Carswell Air Force Base. It's now a Joint Reserve Base that's run by the Navy Reserve. But the Air Force was gracious enough, and God's hand was there in the fact that, one, that program existed, and so I was able to move myself and my family to the Fort Worth area, and my wife and I bought a home that we ultimately lived in for almost 29 years, and we live in a different home now, although in the same zip code, but little different arrangement with that. But my daughter was able to be admitted and was a patient at the Scottish Rite Hospital in Dallas growing up. So she was able to get the surgeries, care, and the great work that they do there at Scottish Rite. So today she wears a prosthesis, and if you saw her walking, you wouldn't know that she was a below the knee amputee, and did so well in life that she was around the medical community that she herself is now a nurse and practicing here in Fort Worth.
Wow. Wow. I think it's interesting that we can look back, most people can look back and see how circumstances sort of fit together. They get woven together for good, usually for good. So I want to go back and talk a little bit more about your patriotism and your love and passion for this great country of ours. Like I started off saying, I've never had anybody on my show in the almost 3 years that we've been doing this who has served in the military or who has anything really to say about that. And so it's really easy, I think, in this day and age to look at the news and see all of the things that our country is definitely changing. And some might say it's changing for the better, and certainly some might say it's changing for the worse, but there is no denying that our country is changing. What do you think about that? What do you think about all of that? And where does you talked about Christ being an example of service, you know, that he was a teacher or a mentor to teach us what true service really looks like in the lives of other people. And we know that Jesus Christ laid down his whole life for humanity. So where does that all fit in with what's going on now, and how can somebody participate in serving their country?
Well, I know for me that having that selfless service and trying to have Christ in my life, and trying to show Christ through my actions and behavior, but just studying the Bible, studying how Christ lived his life and how he taught others, his disciples, and ultimately us through his word, how we can actually show other people how to live that life in a Christ-like way. And to me, one of the greatest ways a person could do that is serving in the military. And people talk about the honor they have in serving, and I feel really honored in the fact that I've been able to serve my country, not only wearing the military uniform, but today as a civil servant. So I still continue to serve, and our country is changing. There are changes that are going on in our country, and I pray and hope that those changes are for the good. There's different directions and different things that take place within our country that sometimes I wonder if we're going in the right direction. But that's why prayer to me is so important, to be able to pray for our country, pray for our country's leaders, and ask for Christ's blessings in our leaders' lives and in the direction of our country. If anyone is contemplating being in the military, I would certainly encourage them to pursue that as a profession, or if a young person is looking at a challenge in life. The military does have some challenges, and there are some things that a person will definitely learn about themselves, about organizational skills, about being a leader, and being able to trust people and work as a group.
What are some of the misconceptions you think people have about military service?
There's probably some that are looked at through either TV shows or movies, things of that nature. But today, I think one of the greatest things that young people are able to do is to be able to serve the country, but also learn skills that they then can learn and use later in life. The military continues to train their people. I even go to training today, being involved with the services for more than 3 decades, and still learn new things that are coming along through technology. Learn new things dealing with people, either in a group setting or those things, to be able to communicate better with people and be able to serve in that way with learning those different skills in life.
One of the things that was interesting to me is this past summer, my husband and I went to Israel. We spent the summer in Israel, and in Israel, everybody there has to serve in the military. Once they turn 18, they serve a certain amount of time in the military, and we don't make people do that. We're not drafting right now in the military here in the United States. And so I think because of that, because there are so many people who have never served in the military, those of us who have not served I've never served in the military, and a lot of people I know have not served, we don't really understand. It's like a whole nother world, and we don't understand what that's all about. And I think it comes with a little bit of mysticism. That's the only word that comes to my mind right now, is mysticism. What is that all about? It's a whole different lifestyle, right?
The military would be a different lifestyle than what one would normally think of. To me, the aspects of being able to serve the country and to be able to be part of the Department of Defense, and even in that name, gives some rationale for some of the training, the camaraderie, but also the discipline that comes with being a part of that organization.
I think, Clay, when you use the word discipline, that scares people sometimes. We kind of live in an undisciplined society, and people don't necessarily want to be disciplined. So what do you mean by that?
Well, I think that even goes back to my faith, and the fact that talking about how Christ strengthens me and how I can and do things through His guidance, and looking at what He has demonstrated to us to be able to live a Christ-like life, in the fact that discipline is part of living. Yes, we live in a society that, even just the basics of driving, that there are certain things that, we don't routinely want to be running red lights in different aspects of
Cause a lot of harm doing that.
Yes, and so I think we all have certain disciplines that we live with in our lives, but that discipline that I'm referring to is able to work as a team, work within the aspects of treating all with kindness, dignity, and respect, and have that discipline to be able to have a goal, be able to go and do a job and complete the mission.
So having that servant's heart for our country.
I think that having that gives that one that discipline to be able to sometimes work in areas and or in conditions that most people would not volunteer to go and do, but having those people, those men and women that are trained to be able to do that and carry out those missions, to me that's one of the joys and an honor to be part of a organization that's able to defend our country.
So where do you see our young people today, this generation of people coming up, do you see them wanting to sort of catch the baton and go forward with it? Do you see as much patriotism in this generation as, say, when you were in the service?
There's patriotism in our country. I don't see it like we did right after 9/11. I still see some people, though, that continue with showing how they do love our country. I'm involved with a group here in Fort Worth, the Greater Fort Worth Civic Leaders Association, and they get together every year and give a free barbecue for the men and women that serve out at the Joint Reserve Base. And so I know there's people that help sponsor that event. And there's other organizations. I know that my son completed his Eagle Scout project, and that service project was actually retiring with dignity about 800 American flags.
Let's talk about that for just a moment, because a lot of people don't know that there is a specific way to retire a flag. You want to talk about that and share that?
Yes, the United States Code actually specifies and gives direction on retiring a flag, preferably by burning. And the Boy Scouts of America, American Legion, other organizations do that occasionally. My son's Eagle Scout project was done right around Flag Day in 2003, and so he was able to actually use a walk, is what we called it. It was a big container, like it was actually towed behind a motorcycle, and the American Legion riders brought it out to the by the front gate of the Joint Reserve Base in Fort Worth, and the Scouts retired those flags that night, and was a really a moving ceremony.
Wow.
And was able to complete his service project doing that.
One of the most moving experiences that my husband and I had was when we went to Washington, D.C., and we went through the Smithsonian. And there they had an American flag, and it was under lights, or very low lights, they didn't want direct lights on it, and it was just so moving to get to walk through there and see that flag and see all of the symbols really that represent this country of ours. And so I think I don't think we teach our children enough about that. We don't talk about it enough. And I'm guilty of that myself. I'm definitely guilty of that. But it's interesting to me that that you would have such a passion for that. I think that is a really neat thing, and maybe you can pass that on. It sounds like you've done that with your son, and maybe your son can do that with this next generation too.
Well, certainly hope that someone can get some motivation and or something from being here with you today. But we do live in a great country, and I truly believe in my heart that God has been with this country and continues to be with the United States of America. And I think that in the heart of our country, God dwells.
Tell me something, Clay, you real quick, and then we'll sort of wrap things up. But you had said that, we need to pray for the leaders of our country. We need to pray for this country, and I definitely agree. I was reading this morning something, and that was sort of the thought that kind of came to my mind. So when you came to do the show today, I was really tickled that this is the direction that we ended up going. But how can we pray? What are the things that we need to be praying for? I mean, it's one thing to say pray for the country, but what is it specifically that you think we need to be praying for?
Well, I think just looking at some of the things that as a country that we're moving towards, that we definitely need to pray for. One is our leaders. We do give a lot of power, if you will, and responsibility, not only to the president, but to those in Congress, and even to our local leaders, all the way down to our cities, to our school boards, our state legislators, all those that serve the people, that people elect to those positions, that we pray for the proper direction for them, and to be able to hopefully make the right decisions in the votes that they make and the decisions they make. The other thing I think that our country just needs to ensure that we continue to put Christ first. And I think for me as a Christian, that there's certain things that our country continues to go towards, but I think that if we continue and put Christ in those thoughts and prayers, that those will continue to bless our country.
I absolutely agree, and that's sort of what I was reading this morning when I was reading, is that God's blessing will be upon us as long as we seek after His will rather than our own will. So it's been just an honor to have you here today. I'm truly, I feel like I've been in the presence of greatness, and I appreciate you being here and sharing these things with our audience and reminding us that we do live in a good country and that there are opportunities to serve and that it can produce a good life. And you've had a good life as a result of, having that integrity and respecting the country and the gifts that you've been given.
Thanks for having me here
today.
today.
Thank you so much for being here. You've been watching the Get Clear Show. And as always, thank you for watching and have a great day.